The Aeneid, Book 7, the Trojans sail towards Italy. Queen Aeneas's old nurse, dies and the Trojans name the land where she's buried after her. Not long after, Aeneas sees a region with a forest filled with birds and the beautiful Tiber River flowing through it. Virgil explains the history of Latium, home of the Latins and future location of Rome. King Latinus is seeking a suitable husband and future heir for his daughter Lavinia. Turnus, king of the Rutulians, seems most likely, but fate has delayed the marriage. Latinus sees a swarm of bees by a sacred laurel, signifying that strangers will arrive. A scary but harmless flame engulfs Lavinia, an omen that she will be long esteemed but also that a war is on the horizon. Latinus goes to a grove sacred to Faunus, a nature god of the region, to pray about the omens. He sacrifices 100 sheep. A voice tells him not to marry Lavinia to a Latin. A foreigner will arrive soon, who will lead to a powerful dynasty. The Trojans land their ships and have lunch, eating food that they've placed on top of pieces of bread. Aeneas jokes that they re-eating their tables, so the harpy Calon's prophecy of famine has been harmlessly fulfilled. Anchises had also told Aeneas in the underworld to build his home on the spot where he eats his tables. Jove sends thunder, and the Trojans rejoice to have reached their destined home. They begin immediately to build a fortress and camp. A delegation of Trojans without Aeneas journeys to Latinus's city. Latinus invites them to the palace, which is richly decorated with mythological images. He asks them how they arrived, and recalls that Trojan ancestry can be traced back to Latium. The Trojan Aeneas praises Jove, describes Aeneas's greatness, asks if the Trojans can stay in peace, and offers gifts to Latinus, including some of Priam's robes. Latinus realizes that Aeneas must be the foreigner destined to marry Lavinia. He tells the Trojans they may stay, but first he wants to meet Aeneas, because signs indicated his daughter's fated marriage to Aeneas. He gives horses to the Trojans, and prepares a carriage led by half-god horses for Aeneas. But Juno, spying on the proceedings from above, is disgusted at the Trojans' good fortune and is determined not to let her enemies win. Juno goes to the fury goddess Alecto and instructs her to destroy Latium's peace and turn people against each other. Alecto throws one of her evil magical snakes at Aeneid, poisoning her against Aeneas and making her angry that Lavinia won't marry Turnus. Aeneid tries to convince Latinus to cancel the marriage to Aeneas, to no avail. She runs through the streets, whipping many of the other women of Latium into a frenzy. They rush from the city, taking Lavinia with them, and hide her in the mountains. Alecto next flies to Turnus's bedroom and disguises herself as an elderly priestess. She encourages Turnus to attack the Trojan ships and fight Latinus because of Lavinia. But Turnus dismisses her, saying she should focus on her temple and leave the fighting to the men. Alecto takes on her true, terrifying form and throws a flame at him. Turnus becomes crazy with war lust, like an overheated pot that bubbles over. He sends Latinus a message of war and gathers Rutulian men to be soldiers. Alecto flies to the Trojan camp and makes Aeneas's hunting dogs go mad. Following after the dogs, Aeneas sees and shoots a stag. Unfortunately, that particular stag was a beloved pet of two Latium locals, Tyreus the shepherd and his daughter Silvia. They are furious at what Aeneas has done. Alecto makes a deathly war call emanate from a shepherd's trumpet, and the Trojans rush out of their nearby camp. A battle begins between Trojans and shepherds. Tyreus's son is the first to die. Alecto proudly shows her work to Juno, and offers to do more. Juno refuses the offer and sends Alecto away. The crazed mothers return from the mountains and ask Latinus to declare war. Latinus is reluctant to open the gates of war, which would serve as the declaration. Juno intervenes, opening the gates of war herself. The Latium men rush to arm themselves. The Aeneid, Book 8. Turnus gathers his own men and sends a messenger to the city of King Diomedes, a Greek now living in Italy, to try to win him as an ally. Meanwhile, the spirit of the Tiber River appears to Aeneas in a dream, and tells him not to fear the war. He has finally reached his homeland and the destination of his household gods. The Tiber god tells Aeneas to travel up the river until he sees a white sow with piglets, the same that Helenus predicted in Book 3, which will be the sign of the place where Ascanius should build his city, Alba Longa. The Tiber god also says that near this spot live the Arcadian people, in a city called Paulonium, and that Aeneas should go win the Arcadian king, Evander, to his side. The Tiber god also tells Aeneas to pray to Juno, to make her a little less angry. Aeneas thanks the Tiber god and sails with some of his men along the river. They see the white sow, and Aeneas sacrifices it as an offering to Juno. The men continue, reaching the place where someday Rome's towers will rise, a spot now occupied by Evander's humble home. The Arcadians are in the middle of a feast to honor Hercules and the gods. When they see the ships arriving, Pallas, Evander's son, goes to greet them so that the feast won't be interrupted. Aeneas explains he wants to ally with Evander in the coming war. Pallas is immediately impressed by Aeneas's nobility. Aeneas meets Evander and explains himself. Evander remembers meeting Priam and Anchises as a youth, and quickly agrees to help the Trojans and invites them to join the feast. Evander tells the story of Hercules and Cacus, which the feast commemorates. Cacus, a monster, stole 8 of Hercules' cows and brought them to his cave. Hercules heard the cows mooing, and though Cacus blocked off the cave and breathed fire and smoke at him, Hercules managed to strangle him. Evander gives Aeneas a tour of his city and tells its history. During the peaceful, plentiful Golden Age, Saturn named this place Latium, but the Golden Age faded, and the land changed rulers many times, until Evander's fate brought him here. They look at the Capitoline Hill, future location of many important Roman temples. They also pass by the future Forum, now a field for grazing. Venus asks her husband Vulcan to build a set of armor for Aeneas, and kisses him as encouragement. Vulcan says he would even have built armor for Aeneas at Troy if she'd asked. Vulcan gets his Cyclops workers to build a 7-layered shield. In the morning, Evander and Aeneas meet to talk war. Evander says he would like to fight, but is too old, but he advises Aeneas to go ally with the thousands of Tuscans who revolted against Mezenius' tyrannical rule. Those Tuscans already wanted to join the war against Mezenius, but a prophecy had told them to wait for a foreign commander. Evander also offers to send his troops and his beloved young son, Pallas, to fight for Aeneas and learn the ways of war. Red light, accompanied by thunder, appears in the clear sky. Aeneas explains that it's a sign from Venus that war nears. Evander passionately prays that Pallas will return safely, hoping to die if his son is killed. Aeneas and the soldiers set out, with Pallas leading and looking particularly brave and handsome. The mothers of Paulonium watch them go and cry. Aeneas's group finds the Tuscans and camps with them. As they camp, Venus comes down from the heavens to give Aeneas his new armor. Aeneas marvels at the beautiful helmet, sword, and spear, and finally the ornate shield. On the shield, Vulcan has depicted the future of Rome, including important Roman myths and history such as Romulus and Remus suckling from a she-wolf, and Augustus Caesar leading the Roman fleet to victory at the Battle of Actium, along with the celebrations in Rome afterward. Aeneas doesn't know what the images mean, but he appreciates them, and lifts onto his shoulders now the fame and fates of all his children's children. The Aeneid, Book 9, Iris, sent by Juno, instructs Turnus to attack the Trojans' camp, since Aeneas has left it to find Evander. Turnus thanks the gods for the help and prepares his troops. The Trojans see Turnus' army approaching and prepare to guard the fortress that they've built in their camp. Turnus' men think that the Trojans are cowards to stay in their fortress instead of coming out to meet them on the plain. Turnus rages like a famished wolf who's unable to reach the lambs he wants to eat. After attempting and failing to break into the fortress, Turnus' troops begin to burn the Trojan ships. The action pauses for some backstory about the Roman ships. Cybele, a goddess, gave her sacred trees to the Trojans to build their ships, and asked Jove to shield the ships from storms and destruction. Jove agreed and planned to turn the ships into water nymphs after they served their purpose. Returning to the present time, as Turnus attempts to burn the ships, they transform into nymphs and swim away. Though Turnus's men are upset by the divine intervention, Turnus declares that the lack of ships will actually hurt the Trojans. He doesn't fear fate or the gods, he says, and anyway, the Trojans have messed up his fate to marry Lavinia. He galvanizes his men with a stirring speech and makes plans to scale the walls of the Trojans' camp. As the Trojans guard the walls of their fortress, Nisus, a Trojan, tells his young friend Euryalus about his eagerness to do some brave act. Nisus wants to sneak out through the Rutulian camp surrounding the fortress to find Aeneas and get help for the upcoming battle. Euryalus thinks it's a great idea and wants to come too. Nisus warns that the attempt might prove fatal, and says young Euryalus' life is more important. Euryalus refuses to budge. The Trojan leaders are in the middle of a nighttime meeting trying to decide who should go as a messenger to Aeneas when Nisus and Euryalus come to volunteer. Aeneas and Ascanius praise and encourage them, and Ascanius promises them gifts. Euryalus asks only that they comfort his mother, because he can't bear to upset her. Ascanius cries, remembering his own mother Creusa, and promises he will. Ascanius gives the pair messages for Aeneas, but Virgil foreshadows that the messages will only scatter on the wind. Nisus and Euryalus, under cover of night, creep through the enemy camp, where the Rutulians are drunk and sleeping. Nisus then suggests that they shouldn't waste this chance to kill some of the enemy leaders in their sleep. They quietly kill many men before Nisus finally decides they should stop and continue on through the camp. Euryalus straps on some enemy armor and a helmet as trophies. Meanwhile, Volscens, a Rutulian captain, marches back to Turnus's camp with 300 men. He sees Euryalus' helmet through the dark and calls out, asking who's there. Nisus and Euryalus run into the forest, but Volscens' men chase after. Nisus finds the way through the forest to Latinus' land, but realizes he's lost Euryalus somewhere in the wood. He re-enters the forest, searching, and finds Euryalus, whom enemies have surrounded. Nisus struggles with a decision. Should he save his own life, leaving his friend to die? Or should he attempt a rescue? He prays, then throws his spear, killing a Rutulian. The startled group looks around, and he kills another. Volscens furiously prepares to kill Euryalus. Nisus jumps from his hiding place, saying that he's responsible for the Rutulians' deaths, but it's too late. Volscens stabs Euryalus. Nisus charges forward and kills Volscens even as Volscens kills him. Nisus falls and dies next to his friend. The Rutulians bring back the bodies and mourn their many dead. In the morning, Turnus' side displays the heads of Nisus and Euryalus, stuck on pikes, to the Trojans. Rumors reach Euryalus' mother, who runs to the front lines and says that the robe she made for Euryalus will serve as his shroud, and she didn't even have a chance to say goodbye. She begs the Rutulians to kill her too. Her tragedy lowers the Trojans' morale as each soldier remembers his family. Ascanius and others carry her home. Turnus' troops attempt to scale the fortress walls. The Trojans hold them off, but Turnus throws a flaming torch that sets afire and collapses a Trojan tower, killing many, and throwing two Trojans out onto the Rutulians. One, Helenor, resembles a wild boar as he throws himself onto Turnus' men and dies. The other, Lycus, tries to climb the wall to get back to the Trojan fortress. Turnus taunts him and pulls him from the wall, killing him. The battle sounds like a mother sheep crying after a wolf has taken her lamb. Many men die. Ascanius makes his first kill, using a bow and arrow, his boyhood hobby. His victim is Numanus, a Rutulian soldier who was mocking the Trojans, saying that they, like women, enjoy dressing up in fancy clothes. Ascanius asks Jove to bless his shot, and thunder comes from the blue sky. Ascanius' arrow hits Numanus in the head. Apollo, also famous for his archery, applauds Aeneas's actions from the heavens, exclaiming that he's fated to found a line of great leaders who will bring peace. Apollo comes to Earth disguised as the elderly Trojan Butes, and instructs Aeneas to stop fighting. When he leaves, the other Trojans realize he was a god and remove Aeneas from the battle. The Trojans Pandarus and Biches, who were guarding a gate to the fortress, open it and dare the Latins to enter. They manage to kill some of the onrushing Latins, but then Turnus enters and kills many Trojans, including Biches. Mars strengthens the Latins. Pandarus closes the gate, but in doing so accidentally closes Turnus within the Trojan walls. Pandarus throws his spear at Turnus, but Juno diverts it. Turnus brutally kills Pandarus and many other Trojans, strengthened by Juno. Nesthus, a Trojan, encourages his friends, telling them to remember Aeneas and Troy. The Trojans manage to stop Turnus's progress. Jove sends Iris down to tell Turnus to leave, because Juno can't disobey Jove by continuing to help him. Unable to fight any longer, he escapes by jumping into the Tiber. The Aeneid, Book 10, Jove calls a council of the gods on Mount Olympus. He reminds the gods that he commanded that Italy and Troy should not fight, and asked why they've ignored his orders and what has caused the war. Venus responds first, describing the Trojans' great suffering, Turnus's pride, Alecto's troublemaking, and more. She begs Jove at least to save Aeneas, saying he can do whatever he wants with Aeneas. She proposes that the Trojans return home to rebuild Troy. Juno angrily responds that Aeneas chose to make Turnus his enemy, and that he brought war to a peaceful land. She says that Jove could have helped Aeneas more if he'd wanted, though she acknowledges that he twice saved the Trojan ships. She finished by saying that Jove's anti-war complaints come too late. Jove rules that the war should proceed. Since there's no other solution, the war's results will be left to fate. Back on Earth, as the battle rages on, Aeneas continues to search for allies. He finds Tuscans, also called Etruscans, whose king, Trojan, along with many Tuscan warriors, sail back to Latium. As Aeneas steers his ship in the night, the nymphs that his other ships transformed into in Book 9 swim up to him. The nymph Cymodocea describes the battle situation back in Latium, encourages Aeneas to fight well, and speeds up the boats. Aeneas and the Tuscan troops arrive at the battle in the morning, and Aeneas's Vulcan-made shield shines impressively. Turnus rallies his men to fight on the beach with the famous line, "Fortune speeds the bold." The fighting begins and Aeneas successfully kills many men, though Achates, his trusty friend, is injured. Pallas, the young son of Aeneas's Alyander, sees some of his men, the Arcadians, fleeing in fear on their horses, and gives them a heartening speech. Pallas rushes into battle and his men follow. Pallas fights with Lausus, a boy his age, the son of Turnus's important ally Aeneas. Fate has determined that neither will return to their homes. Turnus's sister Juturna tells him to go help Lausus. Turnus tells the soldiers crowded around to back off so he can kill Pallas, and says he wishes Pallas's father were there to see. Pallas bravely responds that his father will be able to handle any outcome. Pallas prays to Hercules, who watches from the heavens and groans that he can't help. Jove comforts Hercules, saying that the fates are unchangeable, but human bravery brings lasting glory. Pallas throws his spear but barely nicks Turnus. Turnus tauntingly says that he might be able to do better than that, then throws his spear and hits Pallas right in the chest. As Pallas dies, Turnus says that he'll get a proper tomb. Turnus takes Pallas's belt as a prize. Virgil foreshadows that in the future Turnus will wish he'd never touched Pallas. When Aeneas hears of Pallas's death, he goes into a killing frenzy. He takes several Latins alive to use as human sacrifices at Pallas's funeral, then continues to slaughter his enemies. Aeneas even kills men who beg for mercy, insults the corpse of one of his victims, and makes fun of another after he's already killed him. Aeneas and other Trojans finally appear at the battle. Back on Mount Olympus, Jove tells Juno that Venus has been helping the Trojans. Juno asks to remove Turnus from the battle, where the Latins are badly losing, so he can at least see his father, Daunus, before his death. Jove agrees, but warns Juno that she will not be able to use this as an excuse to change the whole war. Juno sends a phantom Aeneas down from the heavens. Turnus throws his spear at the fake Aeneas, then chases the phantom onto a boat, which Juno quickly sets sail away from the battle. Aeneas searches unsuccessfully for Turnus. Meanwhile, Turnus realizes he's floated away and makes a desperate speech to the gods, unsure why he has to suffer so much, why he's doing what he's doing, and even who he is. He says that he wants to commit suicide, or to jump in the water and swim back to the battle, but Juno stops him. In Turnus's absence, Mezenius takes over leadership of the Rutulians. Mezenius is described as resembling a cliff unaffected by crashing waves, a wild boar so ferocious that hunters are afraid to come near. Making a kill, he resembles a hungry lion feasting on his prey's blood. One of his victims, Orodes, warns in his dying words that Mezenius doesn't have long to live, but Mezenius scoffs, saying Jove protects him. Mezenius moves across the battlefield like the giant Orion, so tall that his head is in the clouds. When Aeneas catches up with Mezenius, Mezenius throws his spear at Aeneas. Aeneas deflects it with his shield, though it unfortunately kills one of Aeneas's allies. Then Aeneas throws a spear, which travels through Mezentius's shield and pierces him the groin, though it doesn't kill him. Lausus cries out for his injured father, and Virgil praises Lausus's bravery as deserving lasting recognition. Lausus jumps in to protect Mezenius. Aeneas tells Lausus he's being foolish. Lausus refuses to move, and Aeneas kills him, stabbing him. When Aeneas sees the corpse, however, he grieves, thinking of his own son Ascanius, and promises to treat the body respectfully and return it to his parents. Mezenius cleans his wounds at the Tiber. When he sees the Tuscans carrying his dead son Lausus, he makes a tragic speech, acknowledging that his son's sacrifice saved him. Mezenius gets on his horse, ready to kill Aeneas or die trying. He finds Aeneas and denounces him for taking his son, and fails again and again to spear Aeneas. Finally, Aeneas throws his spear at Mezenius, killing him in one try. In his last words, Mezenius acknowledges that even his own people hate him, and asks for a proper burial with Lausus. The Aeneid, Book 11. The next morning dawns. Aeneas sets up a display of Mezentius's armor as an offering to Mars. Despite his sadness about Pallas's death, he speaks positively to his men, telling them they have fought well, and now they can bury their dead. Afterward, Aeneas cries over Pallas's body, devastated to have broken his promise to Evander to bring his son back safely. He sends 1,000 men to bear Pallas's body back to Evander. Returning to the camp, Aeneas finds a delegation of Latins carrying olive branches, asking for a temporary truce during which they can bury their dead. Aeneas criticizes them for fighting, explaining that he was fated to come here to make his home, and that they should have been friends. Aeneas says that Turnus should have stayed to fight him, because one of their deaths would have ended the war. Finally, Aeneas agrees to the truce. Drances, a Latin, praises Aeneas' war skills and declares that he and King Latinus too would rather be Aeneas' ally than Turnus'. They agree on 12 days of truce. Pallas's funeral procession reaches Evander. Evander flings himself onto the corpse, sobbing, and gives a tragic speech. He wishes he had died instead of Pallas, but doesn't blame the Trojans, and declares that Pallas will receive a Trojan-style burial. A description of the various funerals follows, showing that both the Latins and the Trojans equally mourn their fallen. The Latins, urged on by Drances, want to separate themselves from Turnus, who caused all the suffering. In Book 8, a Latin delegation traveled to ask King Diomedes, a Greek now living in Italy, to ally with them against Aeneas. Now that delegation of Latins returns with news that Diomedes doesn't want to ally, because he's fought the Trojans enough and doesn't want more of the misery of war. Hearing this in a council meeting, Latinus declares that the war was against fate anyway. He chooses a piece of land near the Tiber to give the Trojans, so they can be friends. If the Trojans don't want that, The Latins will build the Trojans 20 ships to continue on their way. Latinus calls for 100 men to bring peace gifts to the Trojans. Drances, the elderly Latin, unsatisfied. He still hates Turnus, and with an angry, convincing speech, he tells Latinus to promise Lavinia to Aeneas. Then he speaks directly to Turnus, telling him either to surrender or to go meet Aeneas in single combat. Turnus responds that Drances is a good talker but doesn't back up his words with fighting. Turnus is particularly offended by the suggestion that he's been beaten. He mentions his many kills, then tells Latinus that he'll renew the battle with allies like Camilla, a ferocious warrior and queen of the Volscians. He declares that he'll fight Aeneas, even though Aeneas wears Vulcan-made armor just as Achilles did in the Trojan War. A messenger arrives with news that Aeneas's army is on the move. The townspeople are in chaos, and Turnus uses the moment to underscore the need to keep fighting. Turnus orders his captains to gather the allied troops, and Latinus ends the council, sorry that the war must continue. The Latins fortify the city, and Aeneid, Lavinia and other women pray at the shrine of Minerva for victory. Turnus eagerly arms himself, resembling a freed horse enjoying himself in the countryside. Camilla arrives, saying that she go meet the Trojans at the front while Turnus guards the city. Turnus explains his plan to ambush the Trojans as they walk through a constricted pathway in a gorge. In the heavens, Diana, the goddess of the hunt, talks to another goddess named Apis. Diana describes her love for Camilla and recounts Camilla's life story. Camilla's father Metabus, a tyrannical king, had to flee when his people revolted. He took baby Camilla with him, but when he had to cross a dangerous river, he didn't know how he would carry her. So he tied her to a spear and, with a prayer to Diana, threw her across. Camilla landed safely on the other side, where Metabus joined her. He lovingly raised her in the wilderness and she became an incredible hunter. Since the omens suggest a bad fate for Camilla in this battle, Diana sends Apis down with a bow to kill the man who will kill Camilla. The battle begins and various men die. In the middle of the scene of carnage, Camilla appears, with one breast bare, a brilliant and untiring fighter, and accompanied by other virgin warriors. Camilla kills multiple men with single arrows, and even slays Boeotus, the biggest Trojan. She mocks the Tuscans for being afraid of a woman. Tarchon, the Tuscan king, tries and fails to kill her. Chloreus, a Trojan soldier, begins his attack on Camilla. He is dressed in particularly gorgeous, highly colored armor. Camilla pursues him, wanting his armor for herself, afire with a woman's lust for loot and plunder, and lets her guard down. Aruns, a Trojan ally, prepares to kill Camilla. He prays to Apollo that if he can kill her, he'll stop fighting and return home. Apollo grants half the prayer, and Aruns spears Camilla. As Camilla dies, she tells her friend Acca that Turnus must come to take her place. Apis follows through on Diana's wishes, locates the fleeing Aruns, and kills him with one shot from her bow. The Latin army falls apart after Camilla's death. The Trojan side enters the city of Lavinium and kills people right in the gateway. Turnus, who was still in the gorge waiting for the ambush, hears about the unfortunate turn from Acca and returns to the city. Just after Turnus leaves, Aeneas and his men march through the gorge. He sees Turnus from afar, but night is falling, so their reckoning will have to wait until tomorrow. The Aeneid, Book 12. In a rage at the turn of events against the Latins, Turnus announces to Latinus his intention to fight Aeneas and win Lavinia's hand. Latinus begs Turnus to reconsider, but Turnus is resolute. He says he's strong enough, and Venus won't be able to protect Aeneas when they fight man to man. Mata cries that if Turnus dies, she die too, rather than see her daughter with Aeneas. Turnus tells Aeneid, whom he calls mother, not to bother him further with her fears. Tomorrow he'll fight Aeneas. He puts on his armor, including his special sword, inherited from his father, which was made by Vulcan and dipped in the river Styx. On the Trojan side, Aeneas accepts Turnus's challenge and comforts his friends, and Ascanius by talking about fate. Morning comes and both armies march to the battlefield, not to fight, but to accompany their leaders for the duel. Juno, watching from a nearby mountain, speaks to Turnus's sister Juturna, a nymph of lakes. Juno explains that she's been helping Turnus, and tells Juturna to go try to stop Turnus's fate, because Juno can't bear to watch the fight. Or, Juno says, Juturna could stir up the war again. Latinus, Turnus, and Aeneas enter in separate chariots. Aeneas prays and asks Juno to be more kind. He says the Trojans will leave peacefully if he falls, but he hopes that instead of enslavement or humiliation of one side, the Trojans and Latins will undefeated, under equal laws, march together towards an eternal pact of peace. Latinus agrees and they sacrifice animals. The Rutulians are nervous to see how uneven the duel will be, with Turnus looking scared and weak compared to Aeneas. Juturna sees her chance, and, disguising herself as the soldier Camers, she tells the Rutulians they should fight or they'll be enslaved. The other allies on Turnus's side also get riled up, and then Juturna makes a sign an eagle, the bird of Jove, snatches a swan from the stream, but has to drop the swan when other birds attack it. The Latins, encouraged by the seer Ptolemaeus, think this means that they, like the smaller birds, can win. A Latin named Ptolemaeus throws a spear, which kills a Trojan, restarting the war. With his peace efforts destroyed, Latinus runs back to his city. Aeneas attempts to regain control of the situation, but an arrow hits him. The name of the shooter is unknown, since no one ever wanted to boast of having hit Aeneas. Seeing this, Turnus regains hope and kills many men. Achates and Ascanius, along with Mnestheres, another Trojan, bring Aeneas back to the camp. Aeneas wants them to cut him open to take out the arrowhead so he can go fight again. Iapix, a healer and favorite of Apollo, tries to pull out the arrowhead, without success, since Apollo refuses to intervene. Venus flies to Crete to pick some dittany, a healing herb, and then invisibly mixes it into Iapix's treatment. The arrow now comes out easily, and Aeneas feels well enough to fight. Iapix realizes that his human skills couldn't have cured Aeneas. It's a god's work. Aeneas's return to the battle demoralizes the Latins, and the Trojans kill many enemies. Juturna sees Aeneas stalking Turnus. She pushes Metiscus, Turnus's chariot driver, out of his seat, taking the reins and using her nymph powers to disguise herself as him. She steers the chariot far from Aeneas. Messapus, Turnus's ally and a son of Neptune, knocks off Aeneas's helmet with a spear. Aeneas, frustrated by this and by Turnus's flight, gives up just trying to find Turnus for the duel, and throws himself fully into the battle. He kills so many people so ferociously that Virgil wonders what god can even help him sing about all the slaughter. Virgil wonders if Jove likes seeing all this. Did it please you so, great Jove, to see the world at war, the peoples clash that would later live in everlasting peace? Venus suggests to Aeneas that he attack Lavinium. Aeneas agrees. As the Trojans rush into Lavinium, Aeneas yells to the gods that the Latins have broken to pacts and so he has been forced back into war. Aeneid, the queen, sees the attacking Trojans and thinks that this means that Turnus has died. Believing this terrible outcome is all her fault, she makes a noose from her dress and hangs herself. Lavinia and the other women mourn, and Latinus puts dirt on his head in sorrow. Turnus, out on the battlefield, hears the cries from the city and wants to go investigate, but Juturna, still disguised as his chariot driver, tells him that others can defend the city while he continues to kill Trojans. Turnus tells Juturna that he's seen through her disguise, and, like his many dead friends, he'd rather die a worthy man like his ancestors than flee like a coward. Just then, Saces, a messenger, tells him that Lavinium is in bad shape and Aeneid has killed herself. Turnus, full of shame and anger, is determined to duel Aeneas. He rushes to the city. Aeneas halts the assault on the city when he hears that Turnus is coming. The armies gather around to watch the duel. The two men start with spears, then fight with swords, They fight like bulls, aiming to kill. Jove places their fates on his scales tentatively balanced for now. Turnus powerfully strikes Aeneas, but his sword breaks. It wasn't his father's Vulcan-made, stick-streeted blade after all, but the one belonging to his charioteer. Turnus runs to try to find his sword. Aeneas chases Turnus, like a hunting dog chasing a deer. Aeneas pauses to try to pull his spear out of an olive tree stump, not knowing that the olive tree, which the Trojans had cut down, had been sacred to Faunus, a nature god worshipped by the Latins. Turnus prays to Faunus to keep the spear stuck, and Aeneas can't wrench it free. Meanwhile, Juturna gives Turnus back his spear, but Venus, finding Juturna's helpfulness unfair, releases Aeneas's spear. Jove asks Juno when this will all end, and what hope she still has. They both know that Aeneas is fated to win, so why bother to get Turnus back his sword? He tells her that she's given the Trojans enough grief. Finally, Juno agrees to yield. But she asks that the Latins keep their old name and customs, instead of becoming Trojans. Jove agrees, saying that the Latin-Trojan race will bring untold glory to Juno. Jove sends down a Fury, a goddess of vengeance, to make Juturna cease helping Turnus. The Fury comes down to Turnus disguised as a bird, and Juturna understands what it means. She wishes she weren't immortal, because she wants to stay with Turnus in the underworld. Aeneas asks Turnus why he's dawdling. Turnus says he fears Jove, not Aeneas. Turnus picks up a boulder that would be hard for a dozen men to carry, and tries to throw it at Aeneas. But he can't throw it hard enough because the Fury weakens him and slows his instincts. Aeneas then strikes Turnus with his spear, on his knees. Turnus reaches up to Aeneas. He asks Aeneas to pity Daunus, his father, and spare him so he can return to his people. He admits defeat and concedes Lavinia. He tells Aeneas, "Go no further down the road of hatred." Aeneas considers Turnus's pleas, but then he sees Pallas's belt that Turnus had removed and wears as a trophy. Aeneas's feelings of mercy change to fury, and he proclaims that Pallas is the one killing Turnus. He plunges his sword into Turnus's heart, and Turnus's soul flies to the underworld.